The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth.
Good morning.
Good morning, Martin.
Today I'm going to be talking about appreciative joy, one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, the divine dwelling places. So, just to begin with, I want to just say I have great appreciative joy for all of you who are joining us online. I have to remember to look here if I'm actually looking at you. Otherwise. In any event, there's 7 of us here at physical Hokyoji. And if sometimes we get down to maybe 2 or 3 people in the Zendo, if people are doing their jobs, sometimes. If a teacher's having face-to-face dokusan with somebody and 2 people are cooking a meal, something like that, it might be a time when our numbers are pretty low. And I've had that happen a couple of sits. And but then I look up at the screen, which is above me, and I see, oh, there's 7 other people here. So it helps. It's very inspiring. So thank you all, especially who are at your homes, for joining with us and sticking with us so much. So for myself, I think it would be a very difficult practice for me to do a sesshin by myself. So I really admire your practices. Well, these days I can actually give a talk on joy. I think you'll have to inform me if it's successful or not. But in the event, I do remember as I was preparing, I was recollecting an incident that happened, 30 years ago, maybe. And so that would have made me about 39, something like that. And I'm not sure what exactly the time, but it was after Joan Snyder O'Neill returned from practicing at a Theravada monastery in England. I think that's when it happened. In any event, she said to me, she said, Dokai, everyone's just so happy and joyful there. And I said, what kind of a practice would that be? Sounds pretty flaky to me. So I actually kind of, and it probably fit me, the practice that Katagiri did, this kind of really grueling. For me, it was grueling in my early days, just grueling. Get so tired and sat in so much pain. And I remember somebody asking him a question during a talk that said, Hojo-san, what about the pain is just so intense? And he said, everybody has pain. And I, it's like, I got into it. I said, okay. But these days, I'm thinking, that's not the kind of response I would give these days. Especially with physical pain in your body. Makes practice very difficult and challenging. So I'm gonna this morning I'm gonna be looking at a particular sutta in the Nikayas. It's called an exposition of Can you maybe move that right here? That light kind of move here. This the light. Well, the unclicked. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, that's better. Okay. This is from the Majjhima Nikayas, called the Exposition of the Sixfold Base. So, there's some numbers going on here, which I'll try to explain. We'll keep it more simple. So he says, the Buddha says, 18 kinds of mental exploration should be understood. On seeing a form with the eye, one explores a form productive of joy. One explores a form productive of grief. One explores a form productive of equanimity. And then he goes through each of the senses. So that was seeing a form with your eye, or hearing a sound. And then it's those three things, productive of joy, grief, and equanimity. So those are the 18 kinds of mental exploration. And in Buddhism we have, there's 6 senses, mind and mind object. This is number 6. The other 5 are the same that we have in our modern day culture. So then he says, the 36 positions of beings should be understood. There are 6 kinds of joy based on household life, 6 kinds of joy based on renunciation, 6 kinds of grief based on household life, and 6 kinds of grief based on renunciation. And there are 6 kinds of equanimity based on renunciation. First, I'm going to talk about household and renunciation. In this particular Sangha, and everyone who we practice with in this way, we're both renunciates and we have household lives. In the Theravada tradition, maybe it's somewhat more delineated, and maybe in Buddhist time even more delineated. But for our purposes, all of us have a household life, all of us have a renunciated life. The household life is taking care of our business, paying our bills, putting money in the bank, driving our cars, and just, also has the aspect of needing things to feel secure, acquiring things, which I think all of us experience. And we're all renunciants. How is that true? Because we're here. We're doing the practice of renunciation right now. All of you who are even in your homes are doing the practice of renunciation right here and now. And there's a few of us here who actually live at Hokyoji most of the time, or some of the time. And even so, it's not like my home. I've studied this a little bit in my thinking. If I say I'm going home, I'm going to go to my apartment in La Crosse. That's what I think of as home. And the reason I never say I'm going home if I'm going to Hokyoji. I say I'm going to Hokyoji. Because there's something about this place that is not mine. I can't refer to it as mine. So I just want us to all be clear when we go back and forth between the joy of home life and the joy of renunciant life. For us, it's applicable both ways. And also, I know this talk is supposed to be about joy, so I'm doing my best. But if I would just sit here and talk for an hour about joy, you guys, I wouldn't be able to hold your attention. So when we talk about joy, we have to talk about grief. And then we talk about equanimity. And this helps also because that can be a prelude for tomorrow's talk by Myo-O, who will emphasize equanimity. Okay. Oops. Okay. Herein, what are the 6 kinds of joy based on household life? When one regards as an acquisition the acquisition of forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, gratified, and associated with worldliness, or when one recalls what was formerly acquired that has pleased, ceased, and changed, joy arises. Such joy as this is called joy based on household life. Let's just look at that. For one thing, and then the 6 kinds are, again, going through each of the senses. He was talking about forms cognizable by the eye. The next one is sounds, heard by the ear, that kind of thing. So he goes through all 6. But he does an interesting, I was just noticing this this morning, and I thought maybe it was a misprint, but it's the same all the way through. When one regards as an acquisition the acquisition of. So that's kind of an interesting way of putting it. It says when one regards as an acquisition the acquisition. And you see the little, it's like when you regard that you have actually acquired the acquisition of something. So it's like, did you really acquire it? You regard that I got it. You regard that you do that. Then the joy arises. I mean, let's talk about your first automobile. It was probably not a brand new one unless you really came from a wealthy family. It was probably a second-hand car. Maybe it had I don't know. But anyway, you might have felt really joyful when you acquired that. But now, we don't feel so. But we might remember that we did feel joyful. So I really thought that was I didn't discover that till this morning. I've read this a lot of times. I mean, one regards as an acquisition, the acquisition of things. Now that's the joy of household life. And next is, what is the joy? 6 kinds of joy based on renunciation. When, by knowing the impermanence, change, fading away, and cessation of forms, one sees as it actually is with proper wisdom that forms both formally and now are all impermanent and subject to change, joy arises. So that's why we're here. Because we've realized that everything is impermanent. That's why we're doing this practice of renunciation. We wouldn't be here doing this practice if we didn't realize that. It's not exactly easy practice, at least not all the time. Yesterday afternoon, when I was preparing for this talk, I experienced some kind of spontaneous happiness, which I hadn't experienced before during this session. It was pretty kind of grueling. But it was just spontaneously, I just felt happy. And the thought occurred to me, oh, it's going to be easy to talk tomorrow. So that lasted about 15 minutes or so. And then I came to the Zendo and I started sitting Zazen and I started to get a really stiff back. And all the periods in the evening, particularly the 2 periods in the evening, were really tough because I felt a lot of pain. And going to bed, I had to take a bunch of ibuprofen and a couple of sleep aids. you know, and I woke up not feeling bad, let's say. But when I was going to sleep, I said, I don't know how in the world I'm going to talk about joy tomorrow. It's not going to be possible. I'll be a miserable failure. So, in any event, things change. So, just to saying that again, by knowing the impermanence, the fading away and the change of forms, just by knowing that, all the forms, sounds, smells, tastes, touch, tactile sensation, they all fade away. They're impermanent and subject to change. When we just see that, when we just realize that, joy arises. Just from that, just from seeing the impermanence. That's the joy based on renunciation. Okay. Okay, now, where am I going to go? Oh. Okay, now, what's the, now we're talking about grief. What are the 6 kinds of grief based on household life? It's just the counter of what joy was. When one regards as a non-acquisition, the non-acquisition of forms, cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, gratifying, and associated with worldliness, or when one recalls from the past those things that you didn't get, that you wanted, grief arises. So when we didn't get what we didn't want, or we're not getting what we want in terms of acquisitions of forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, pleasant, agreeable, grief arises. Now here's one of the most interesting parts of this sutra. What are the 6 kinds of grief based on renunciation? When by knowing the impermanence, change, fading away, successional forms, one sees as it actually is with proper wisdoms, that forms both formally and now are all impermanent and subject to change, one generates a longing for the supreme liberation thus. When shall I ever enter upon and abide in the base that the noble ones are now enter upon and abide in? In one who generates such a longing for the supreme liberation, grief arises, with that longing as condition. To me, that's I've been contemplating that for a long time. It's when I first read it, it helped me understand Dogen more. It's a lot, this really ties into, I think, how Dogen speaks a lot. That's why he says, have no design on becoming a Buddha in the Fukushima Zenki. So I'll just repeat this. In one who generates a longing for liberation, grief arises with that longing as condition. So if we're longing to acquire a state or be in a state of mind that we're not in, grief arises just from that longing, just from that very longing or wishing for something different than what is just right in front of us. Isn't that really profound? Then, now we're going to move to what are the 6 kinds of equanimity based on household life. On seeing a form with the eye, equanimity arises in an ordinary person who has not conquered the limitations or conquered the results of action and who is blind to danger.
Say it again, please.
On seeing a form with the eye, equanimity arises in, he calls it, in a foolish, infatuated, ordinary person. So, yeah, I'm foolish, I'm infatuated, I'm an ordinary person. So equanimity arises like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Everything's cool. Who has not conquered limitations or conquered the results of action and who is blind to danger. In other words, it's kind of like, you're okay, I'm okay, everything's just okay. But we're not seeing, we're probably not seeing impermanence. It's the metaphor or simile that I think this is like is the term we use, a couch potato. That's
The what?
a couch potato.
Oh, okay.
In other words, I certainly am one of them. Sometimes I get to the end of my day, and all I want to do is just blank out. I don't want to be have tough stuff to deal with. So I've got Netflix. I got an easy chair at my home. Well, I have one here. Now I have them both here too. But I can just kind of sit back and zone into these series, Just say, watch one episode, they go on and on and on and on. And, up next, oh yeah, well. And they keep going, they just leave you like at the end of a rope, so next one. So anyway, it's kind of like that. But there's a certain danger, I think, in getting into that excessively. What are the 6 kinds of equanimity based on renunciation? When by knowing the impermanence, change, fading away, and cessation of forms, one sees as it actually is with proper wisdom, that forms both formally and now are all impermanent and subject to change, equanimity arises. Such equanimity as this transcends the form. That is called equanimity based on renunciation. So did I emphasize that the other one, you do not transcend the form? I said that, did I? In household life? I don't actually remember saying that.
No, you didn't say that, you just said
Okay.
couch potato.
Oh, okay, I stopped. Who's blind to danger? The last sentence is, such equanimity as this does not transcend the form. That is why it's called equanimity based on household life. I'll say it like when I was using the example of watching Netflix. I can transcend the form after I've watched about 8 episodes in a row. And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, oh, why did I do that? Or the next morning. Then I say, oh, I transcended the form. But this means like seeing it actually before you kind of engage in the activity. I'm going to go to another section in this sutra. It's kind of about joy or equanimity, let's put it that way. Again, leading into Myo-O's talk tomorrow. I probably read this for the first time when I was just beginning to teach. A little bit, maybe a little before. But anyway, well, I at least had been teaching Zazen instruction, those kind of things, and I gave a Dharma talk or two. So I came across this passage where it says, there are 3 foundations of mindfulness that noble ones cultivate, cultivating which the noble one is a teacher fit to instruct a group. And I read that and I said, uh-oh, this is going to be bad news. It was going to be, because I was already teaching. And I thought, oh boy, I don't know if I want to read on or not. Kind of like, I've been acquainted with some of the stuff Dogen says, about being a teacher, which is pretty frightening. But I'll read it to you. Now it's not so frightening because I understand this part. This isn't. Because I get it, quite a bit. Here, bhikkhus, compassionate and seeking their welfare, the teacher teaches the Dharma to disciples out of compassion. This is for your welfare. This is for your happiness. The disciples do not want to hear or give ear or exert their minds to understand. They err and turn aside from the teacher's dispensation. With that, the teacher is not satisfied and feels no satisfaction, yet dwells unmoved, mindful, and fully aware. This is called the first foundation of mindfulness with which the teacher is fit to instruct a group. Here's the second foundation of mindfulness. Same thing. This is for your welfare. This is for your happiness. Some of the disciples will not hear or give ear, and they err and turn aside. Some of the disciples will hear and give ear and exert their minds to understand. They do not err and turn aside. With that, the teacher is not satisfied and feels no satisfaction, and not dissatisfied and feels no dissatisfaction. Remaining free from both satisfaction and dissatisfaction, dwells in equanimity, mindful and fully aware. last one. And you can probably guess. This is for your happiness. The disciples here, they give ear, they don't turn away. And with that, the teacher is satisfied and feels satisfaction, yet dwells unmoved, mindful, and fully aware. So, it's something I think not only applicable for teachers, but for all of us, because all of us are teachers within our community. So it's basically, however, in our relationships with each other, we have to be careful of our expectations. I'm at my, no, it's 11, right? Then I'm supposed to start, yeah. No, I've got 2 more minutes. Yeah, that's right, 11. Okay. Spend the last 10 minutes on a different sutra. And this is more like, this isn't talking directly about joy. However, if you want to see more about, or learn more about what the Buddha says about joy, a good place to work is the Sutra number 118, Mindfulness of Breathing. He also, just for your information, the Buddha lists 7 factors of awakening. And one of them is joy. I read that quite a long time ago too, and I kind of, when I read it, I was a little surprised, let's say. But I believed it. I did, having read it in the Nikayas. And my experience was, if I'm not getting happier doing this practice, maybe I'm not doing something right. If I'm getting more and more depressed studying Zen Buddhism, trying to do Zen Buddhism, maybe I'm not doing it right. So I think I actually did start changing things around. Okay. So in the Mindfulness Sutta, the Buddha takes us through, just starting with our breathing. It's the sutra on breathing, mindfulness of breathing. And he just goes steadily through until how that leads to full awakening. I'm going to read a different sutra, and this is more to help us look at our meditation. And I remember Reb Anderson spoke on this sutta once at Clouds and Water. It's kind of an interesting story. I'll paraphrase it, the beginning part. There was this occasion when the Buddha was wandering, and in a place, and he came to the home of the Pater Bhagava. And he says, if it's not inconvenient for you, Bhagava, may I stay one night in your workshop? And Bhagava says, it's not at all inconvenient. You may stay there as long as you like. But also there's another homeless person staying there. So if it's all right with him, please stay as long as you like. So the Buddha goes and meets this person. His name is Pukasati. And he's gone from home life into homeless out of faith in the Buddha. And then Buddha asked Pukasati, is it okay if I stay here with you tonight? And Pukasati said, oh, sure, friend, sure. The workshop's plenty big. You stay over there, I'll stay here. So the Buddha laid out some straw, and he sat in meditation for most of the night. And so did Pukasati. He sat in meditation almost all the night. And the Buddha said, this bhikkhu, he wasn't ordained yet, but this person inspires confidence. Suppose I should ask him a question or two. So, Buddha asked him, under whom have you gone forth? Who is your teacher? And Pukasati says, friend, there is this person, Gautama. And it said he's from Shakya clan. He's a good report about him. He's upright. He's what happened? 287. Well, I gotta wait a minute. Oh, right. Okay, I gotta do this by heart. Yeah, he's well established, pure in conduct, all that. And it's him who I've decided who I follow. And then the Buddha asked him, do you know where this person is right now? He says, yeah, I think he's up north in Savatthi. That's what I heard last. And he said, Buddha asked him, would you know this person if you saw him? And he says, nope, I wouldn't know him. I've never seen him before. And then the Buddha says, well, let me teach you a little something about Dhamma. And anyway, it's a very long and moving discourse. However, for the purposes of this talk, I have to only talk about, or I'm only going to talk about one paragraph in the whole sutta. Patasati says, I am, in quotes, is a conceiving. I am this, is a conceiving. I shall be, is a conceiving. I shall not be, is a conceiving. I shall be possessed of form, is a conceiving. I shall be formless, is a conceiving. I shall be percipient. I shall be non-percipient. Conceiving is a disease. Conceiving is a tumor. By overcoming all conceivings, one is called a sage at peace. And the sage at peace is not born, does not age, does not die. is not shaken and is not agitated. For there is nothing present by which he or she might be born. Not being born, how could there be aging? Not aging, how could he or she die? Not dying, how could he or she be shaken? Not being shaken, why should there be agitation? So what's deeply moving about this is just that if we examine, we could look at our zazen. How often do we think, I want to do this, I want to do that. He just says that I am is conceit. It says, here he says conceiving, and he says conceiving is a kind of a disease. In other places he says I am is conceit. Just to say I am. So I'm going to go over our time by just a few minutes, I think, but so this conceiving is a disease. The way I think of that is we recognize that being addicted to alcohol or anything, we call that a disease now. You know, it's not like a imperfection or you got to get rid of it or something like that. It's a disease. But we're addicted, or we can be addicted to a substance like that. I think we are all addicted to thinking. It's just an addiction. It's a pure addiction. So in that way, we can call it a disease. And that's what the Buddha said. Conceiving is a disease. A tumor. If you don't think so, just look at what we do in Zazen. We're just constantly this craving for thinking about ourselves. Constantly emerges. So that's what I'd like to ask you to consider when you're doing your Zazen. To try to just examine your conceiving. And I've often said that usually your conceiving or your thinking in Zazen is about you. You might think it's about, someone else, but come back to you. So I'd like to ask you to just examine when these thoughts come up, just to be aware that they're coming up and maybe cut off the addiction before you go on and on and on with it. So I could say a little more, but I've passed our time now by a couple minutes. So I'll tell you the end of the story. So, what's his name? The guy, Pukasate, he realizes in the midst of this quite long discourse, oh, this is the guy. This is the guy that I've gone forth under. And then he says, sorry, I didn't realize, you were the venerable one, the fortunate one. And Buddha says, it's okay. And then Pakasate says, I would like to go forth, become your disciple. And the Buddha asks him, do you have your bowl and robes? Because you had to come with that you had to somehow find a way to provide that for yourself before entering the order. And it says, no, I haven't done that. And so, okay, when you do it, come back and see me. So they go their separate ways, and unfortunately Pukasati is looking around for his bowl and robes, and he gets killed by a cow. stray cow. And, so, end of story. Not quite the end, because some disciple comes to the Buddha and says, "Oh, you know what happened to Pukasati?" And no, he says, "Well, he got killed." And the Buddha said, "Oh, he's okay. He's okay." So anyway, that's my talk for today. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
May our intention
Penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are limitless. I vow to treat them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.